For this item, I have Councillor Zulfikar Ali present, and do we have Conrad online? See, I was looking for you and I didn't see you there, Conrad. Okay. And for the viewing public, I would say that this item is to consider new council's financial outturn for 2020-23 and the first quarter for 2023-24. This is part of the committee's scrutiny of budget performance throughout the year as part of our role of holding the executive to account. This follows on from the consideration of the council's budget position and performance at our last meeting in July. This report includes the overall outturn budget performance for the last financial year, the current first quarter performance, as well as the current key budget issue, risk, and mitigations. Can I now hand over to Councillor Zulfikar Ali to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Zulfikar Ali, Cabinet Leader.
I have about 3 minutes maximum, Councillor Ali, to introduce.
I shall be very brief, Chair. And I think, as you may recall, we put the budget to Cabinet on 20th of July, and the same evening, we were here in front of you to question us with respect to the contents of the report that was approved in terms of the last financial year. And you heard that at the time, and you, I'm sure, noted in the report that there was substantial improvement in terms of the previous forecast. So we did pretty well in that sense. But we highlighted clearly the national issue, the crisis in terms of the homelessness, which is the biggest issue we are facing, as well as the government's undecisiveness or unwillingness to actually support the national crisis, and the interest rates, the cost of living, the inflation, which all have had an impact on the resources the council has. 2/3 of our budget comes from central government, and 2/3 of it goes on children and adult social care services. Had we not had the unfortunate situation with temporary accommodation, as you would have noted, Chair, we would have been in surplus and we would have had 4+ million to reinvest in the services. But unfortunately, that's where we were because of the government's failure to fund us properly. But the good thing is that we also presented you a medium-term financial strategy and the best possible scenarios that we could. At the same time, the Q1 report was also presented there. We are continually monitoring the situation. We are making sure that the arrangements we put into place in terms of budgetary controls and the governance arrangements are still in place, and they are showing some fruit in most of the area. But clearly the challenges are bigger because the cost is getting bigger and bigger. We're not the only one. And if you look at across London, there was a recent survey by London Council, which showed that there are authorities who are projecting well over 20 million plus. And we happen to be number 13, I think, right in the middle of authorities in terms of where we are. But I will now hand it over to Conrad to take any further details, unless you want to go straight to the question.
If Conrad would only have 1 minute, max.
Sorry.
Thank you. My name is Conrad Hall. I'm the Council's Corporate Director of Resources and Statutory Chief Finance Officer. What you have in the pack is the report taken to July. And in addition, some updated information on the financial position on temporary accommodation, as we understand that is the committee's principal area of interest and focus. We also have offices online to deal with adult social care, which I understand is another area of interest. Just to emphasise what Councillor Ali just said there, like all local authorities, I think we are facing significant financial challenges. There is nothing particularly unusual from the benchmarking that we've been able to get about Newham's position. It nonetheless remains our responsibility to deal with the financial pressures that are set out in the report.
Thank you. Felix, can I remind you that there are some exempt papers on this agenda pack? On my agenda pack, there are pages 253 to 316, and they form appendix 4A, 4B, and 4C. If we are going to be asking questions on those, can we reserve them for the end? So just indicate to me that you want to ask questions today, and then we will have to see the text and copy for any question on these exempt papers. That agreed. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, and Conrad, and I now hand over to members for questioning and Councillor Masters.
Given the level of risk and the possible funding gap of at least 25 million, is there going to be a reassessment of all spending plans where there is actually scope to vary against the current corporate plan?
And that has to be a political response from Zopi or the mayor?
Well, clearly, Chair, this is, as Conrad said, is a big challenge. We're not alone in it. And clearly, this is something that, as previously we've demonstrated, in fact, we are managing our resources pretty well. We've, the projection that we had in the earlier year last year was much higher than the final outturn, which was pretty good. So it demonstrates we are doing everything we can to do that. And we will continue to do the same thing again here. We are looking at every service area to see what else we can do in order to improve the services, get some efficiencies, make some savings, and look at alternative ways of doing things. So, in answer to your question, no stone is left unturned, but we obviously have manifesto commitments, we have corporate priorities, and our priority will be to make sure we deliver, those priorities as much as we can. But there are ways to look at the budgetary provisions and expenditures, along with the CMT and the cabinet leads, and I'm fairly confident that every cabinet member and the corporate director is working pretty hard to make sure that they're looking at their budgets. And one of the instructions all budget holder has is to deliver services within budget. And that's something that we're still making sure that we'll do that. And there will be a star chamber process, which will be commencing very shortly, where we'll be interrogating and scrutinizing the actual budgetary provision within each area. So we are doing everything we can as administration, as a political administration, as well as CMT, to make sure that we reduce the overspend. But clearly, temporary accommodation is a major cost. If we can find ways to reduce those, which we are doing, there's a lot we're doing in that area. And if we manage that, we will be achieving a great success. But we are looking at various options in that area too, to make sure that we minimize the overspend as much as we could by actions we take. Thank you.
Councillor Masters.
Just a quick follow-up question. What you've described as the normal budget process, this is not a normal budgetary situation. We've never had a budget gap on this scale before. We've had 13 years of austerity as a council. So I would imagine most of the kind of key efficiencies have been found and made. But a gap of 25 million, surely we need a different kind of approach, rather than the star chamber that we normally have.
Well, I don't disagree, Jay, but the issue is that we need to go through the whole budget process in order to make sure where we can actually streamline, where we can achieve saving, where we can improve efficiencies, and where we can look at things doing differently, bearing in mind that we have strategic priorities which we have agreed. So yes, we will look at everything, but unless we look at everything, we're not going to be able to look at any differently. If you're saying that we should radically cut services, it's too early to speculate that, because the government doesn't tell us until 24th or 23rd of December what the next year's settlement is going to be. So all this, the scenarios that you had back in 20th February and 20th July were based on a number of assumptions that officers made based on their practical experience to project where we think we might be. But this is a fluid situation being continually monitored, and we'll make sure that we do everything we can to have a balanced budget at the end of the year.
So just to be clear, we have this gap of 25 million, which we do know will be the minimum we're going to have, but we're not bringing through any new kind of process to analyse how we're going to address this.
I think you, as I said earlier in my introduction, Chair, that we have an exemplary track record of making sure that we deliver saving as much as we can. If you recall last year, our projection was much higher, substantially higher, and we actually left with 2.4 million, 7 million we ended up in outturn, but previously it was 3.1 million greater. So we have it demonstrated successful. So that 25 million is currently a forecast, and that forecast is based on, as I said earlier, a number of assumptions officers have made depending upon what the outcome is going to be in terms of government's review and various other activities we're taking. We have a transformation program. So there's a lot of strains which are being looked at in order to make sure that we come up with reductions which are palatable, continue to deliver good high quality services without affecting the performance for our residents.
I know Conrad wants to come in, but before Conrad comes in, let me just ask you something mentioned, then you can address both. Councillor Master said 25 million minimum. We were told at the last meeting it's going to range anything between 25 million to 50 million or thereabout. And if it goes to that amount, it's going to be about anything from 10 to 20% of this year revenue budget. When Councillor Master asked the question, I understand where she's coming from. So therefore, and I know we're talking about the track record, but then we've cut, or if you've got efficiency savings and just about everything we cut before. And so therefore, what is left now to get efficiency savings on, because we've been doing this for umpteen years. So there isn't much, I think, that is there to get savings on. So what the members asking and what I want to know and the general public want to know, is there a time and when we may be looking at some of the manifesto commitment? I know everyone, and I for one, fought on the manifesto commitment, but there comes a time where you may have to revisit it and say to the general public, we cannot deliver because of X, Y, and Z. When is that time? And are you considering it? And also, it's not early because we are halfway through the financial year. And this time, I know your office is well underway in considering budgets, assumptions, and so on for the next year.
Clearly, Chair, as I said earlier, we're not alone in this unfortunate situation. We are along with the rest of the country, rest of London. Our financial. Let me finish.
But we're talking about us, not about the others right now. So
I'm coming.
what we are doing.
I'm coming to that. And so, as I said earlier, we are looking at every service at the moment to make sure that we find ways to reduce the potential for overspend. The figure you quoted, 25 to 35 million or 50 million, is a speculative forecast. Yes, and the forecast is forecast. We've had this forecast similarly before. We are going to be looking at it to make sure that we minimize the impact, and whatever it takes to do that, we will be doing that. And if that means that we look at what we do, things, how we do it, and possibly looking at some of the commitments we made, we will review those. But ultimately, as council, we have a duty to balance the budget.
Thanks, sir.
And we will find ways to do that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we jump to the conclusion that we're going to immediately withdraw the manifesto. No, that is not the case. We look at every other avenue before we actually go there.
Thanks, Sophie. Conrad.
So just to the point that's been made about the scale of the target, just by way of context, if the 25 million estimate turns out to be accurate, that would be around about 7% or a shade less than 7% of the council's net budget. So I think it's important to provide that context to it. As has been said, given the lack of information we have from government, it's clearly entirely possible that target may increase. I'd be obliged to say it's possible, although I'm not hopeful, but it is possible the target may end up lower than that. We don't know where government is going to end up with on funding. So just provide that contextual information about what we think the scale of the challenge for next year is. And then lastly, on the efficiency point, with respect, Chair, I entirely take the point that the 13 years and more this council, although we've been looking for efficiency savings, I don't think we'll ever stop doing that. I think indeed, the time when we stop looking for further efficiencies is when something's really going wrong. I'm still hopeful that we will, through a robust budget process, be able to identify efficiencies that can lead to us delivering the same level of service for less cost. Equally, I think it would be unreasonable to expect that we can get through the entire budget process on that. There will clearly need to be difficult political choices.
Unless it's going to be something material there, I would have to move on. So are you going to add?
Well, I hope it's material. I mean, just building on what both Councillors Zulfikar Ali and Conrad Hall have stated, we're not blind to the 13 years of austerity and the prognosis that's been presented in terms of the impact on local government, because it's part of the noise that we're having to contend with year in, year out. And there's also something important and worth emphasising. In addition to efficiencies, it's incumbent on us as part of our obligations around, the best public service delivery fit for purpose for the 21st century that enables us to balance a budget and meet our statutory requirements as well as deliver on political priorities, that we also look at transformation. And that will be part of the commentary that we'll provide in the next agenda item when we get to it. And also has been the subject of discussions at Scrutiny in the past, over the past municipal year, and no doubt will characterise some of the ongoing discussions of Scrutiny.
Thank you. Okay, I need to move on now to Councillor Ford.
Just a quick one. In terms of your planning assumptions, you came here in July and told us 25 to 50. Is that still the case? Because you seem to be not quite, you're telling us is that your planning assumption? 25 to 50 million pound funding gap in the medium term? And just clarify that, please.
I'll ask Conrad to.
So we haven't formally updated the estimate since July, so it's still as good an estimate as we can hope to have, but I wouldn't want anyone to say
Okay.
that that 25 million number is
Clear.
could vary.
Clarify, because seem to be shifting sands from over. So the question is, how much have you budgeted for the Borough of Culture in 2025? What's the financial cost of the Borough of Culture?
I'll refer to Andrew, if you got the figures there.
It's
Which financial year, sorry?
Kind of planning.
Borough of Culture is in 2025, we're bidding for it. I'm asking how much in total will it cost us as the borough?
if I may, just to, through the chair, could you kindly seek some clarification on the question? What I've heard is the cost of the Borough of Culture as a statement, is that the cost of the Borough of Culture bid or the cost of the Borough of Culture
The cost of
programme
Give
that
us-
the cost of the Borough of Culture programme that we would be looking at delivering if we were successful for the bid. And also, Chair, if I may just seek clarification via you, is there a request for the amount in the budget as approved in February that's been assigned to culture, because that budget is leveraged for the purposes of the bid process?
I have to clarify my question, Chair. The reason why I asked that, because
Councillor.
in July, we were told there's going to be a funding gap of between 25 to 50 million pounds, and those cuts in services will come by approximately 2025, right? And we're going to make cuts to services which are equivalent to 10% in our budget. We are now bidding to be a Borough of Culture, which is going to cost us money. And in the very year, we're going to have to say to residents, we're going to cut 25 to 50 million pounds. We're going to be a Borough of Culture, right? Which, which is arts, whatever, which, and I know there are other boroughs where I would have thought we would have been a bit more focused on core services. And I really want to know, Embo, how much is the bid going to cost us to write? How much is the programme going to cost? Have you capped it? Because what I'm worried about on behalf of residents, in 2025, we're all out there on the Borough of Culture, having street parties and everything, at the same time having to tell them we're cutting their services. So I really want to understand, in terms of the medium-term finances, what's going on. Because I also know this month, you, Zulfika, have extended the financial controls in the organisation. And just for the residents watching, there's an extension to recruitment freeze, agency staff, overtime, and other spending controls. I just want some assurance that we are really focused on cutting costs, and we're not letting things get out of control.
Right, I see the mayor.
If I may, so any London borough that that decides that it's going to go for a Borough of Culture designation will have a budget assigned for the bid process, and there is also a pot of money that the Greater London Authority makes available to boroughs, and one element of the Borough of Culture designation prize is a £1 million access to £1 million. And it's important also to understand the approach to any Borough of Culture bid that has been undertaken by all local authorities in London since the programme was conceived. It's as much about providing opportunities of widening participation into culture and creativity as a sector, but also enabling inward investment and the creation of jobs. And I, through the chair, happy to pass it over to James Partis to talk through the current position as it pertains to the Borough of Culture bid process in response to the specific elements or questions that the councillor asked.
James, can you make things, please? Thanks.
I'll make it really brief. I won't provide any more commentary about the financial envelopes for the programme itself, which is still being designed and hopefully will leverage as much federal investment as possible. The bid programme itself, there's £150,000 set aside in the building and fair new budget that came through budget and scrutiny process, which is the pot that's being utilised for bid development alongside a range of other activities. A proportion of that will be dedicated to bid writing, a relatively small portion will be dedicated to bid writing and kind of going through the programme itself. And a key feature of the programme approach at the moment is to explore with partners what's already been planned for that year. Particularly East Bank partners and others are doing a significant amount of cultural development work in the 2025 year itself, which hopefully will, give us quite a meaty programme without too much additionality. But those are my.
Thank you. Councillor Ford, then Masters, and then we close it.
Chair, I haven't had a complete and comprehensive answer to my question. My question was about the financial envelope for the whole complete project, bid writing, executing it, and also more importantly, the cost of staff time and resources. And I put it on record, Chair, the lead member for finance is quite concerned, and rightly so, at the size of the funding. I think residents will be slightly concerned in the same year we're about to cut 25 to 50 million pounds, which is 10% of our budget. We, as an organisation, are diverting our resources to a Borough of Culture. If we're truly committed to writing our budget, Chair, I would have.
Really roundabout question. I think the executive has got a point. And the question that Councillor was asking can be given in a figure rather than an explanation of, because he's asking for an envelope.
I think it needs to be looked at in totality, Chair. As James said, clearly that program is being developed. But I would also like to add that even though there may be some costs in writing the bid, there's grant from the GLA for a small amount, and also there's a reward of 1.35 million if we're successful. So we do need to look at a bigger picture as well in that sense.
So what we're saying to Councillor Paul is that it's work in progress. Right. So you don't. So from your best estimate, then what do you think it might be if it's still work in progress?
There's deadlines for the program submissions, and we don't know when we're going to get anything if we get it. It's difficult to speculate at this stage.
Okay, so therefore, because it's work in progress, and Councillor Paul, basically what the executive is saying, they do not have a figure yet. Can we make it an action as soon as
we are committed to the spend, right? We are committed to the spend. The deadline for budget.
Right. So yeah.
I think it's really important to provide some clarification. There is a budget line that's been assigned to culture as it pertains to a series of a cultural programme that was conceived for this coming financial year. That budget line, a proportion of that budget line is being spent towards the bid submission. The bid submission at this stage, we cannot provide detail because we are mobilising around the deadline date of the 30th of November. As we get closer to that date, we will have clarity around the budget envelope as it pertains to in-year expenditure now. And just to also advise, in the context of the July finance report in-year overspend forecast, there have been, in response to the requests by finance, myself and the interim chief executive at the time, proposals put forward around in-year savings within that cultural budget. So, for example, the Newham Unlocked programme had a allocation of budget for this financial year. We have not gone full blown out on that, and that has been massively reduced in order to contribute to the in-year savings.
I would have to stop you there, Mayor, but basically what you're saying to us is that you've listened to the executive visit to that, and wherever you can make savings, you're making savings. On that budget that you set aside. Okay, thank you. And Councillor Paul, I suppose we would hear more as we draw near. Councillor Master.
I want to come in on the same point. I've got a very simple yes, no answer. As somebody who's sort of been involved in the world of culture, it can make a lot of money. We know it's one of this country's sort of big exports. So my point is, as someone sat down and done a cost benefit analysis, which shows whether we're going to end up making money on having this sort of cultural extravaganza or lose money, bearing in mind Birmingham's position after the Commonwealth Games?
If I may, I think in light of the long-standing issues that Birmingham City Council faced and knew they were facing for years, just in the recent period, I think it was a real folly that they proffered themselves to host the Commonwealth Games. The intention behind our cultural bid is for it not to be revenue draining on the council. It will be as much about income generation for the council and actually working towards a variety of scenarios to see if we can even get to revenue.
So that's my question, which is it's the simple yes or no question. Have we carried out a detailed cost benefit analysis? Yes or no?
That's part of the process of the that we're undertaking at the moment. And I'm really sorry, through the chair, the questions may be presented as requiring a simple yes or no, but I don't think it would benefit the understanding of members of the public, our residents listening to this session, for us to just respond with yes or no.
Okay, so you've given some context to it, but in terms of the cost benefit, and I think Conrad was indicating, and I do need to move on because I need to bring in Rita and then close this off. Okay, sorry. There's so many people wanting to question. Conrad.
I was only going to make the same point that the mayor has made, that the benefit analysis that Councillor Masters referred to is part of the process of developing it.
So it's another work in progress. Rita.
On a different topic completely, and I'm a bear of very little brain when it comes to finance, as some people will testify. I work in the voluntary sector, and this week I have received 2 invites to join working groups that are looking at councils developing a 5-year draft medium-term financial strategy. Are we in a position to do that? And if we're not, how come other councils can and we can't?
Well, from a voluntary sector perspective.
No, these are councils going out to their implementation of obviously they're running up to doing a budget, but they're not looking at a 1 year, they're looking at 5-year. How are some councils able to get to that?
It's for them to explain, but the difficulty we have is the way the government structures the local government financial settlement. We don't hear, until 23rd of December. But I do recall Secretary of State saying that they'll be looking at 2 years funding, etc.
Yeah.
But it really, I mean, you could go, but I think there is the balance to be struck, whether you're going to raise expectations or are you going to be managing things in a way which may not be able to deliver next year by looking at that. But it's a good process to do. There's nothing wrong with that.
Would the administration be opposed to looking at that in further detail, taking on board how other councils may be functioning?
If I may.
2 hands, Conrad and the mayor, and I just add quickly to that, but we have done it before in this council. So, okay, mayor.
So, if I may, we are not averse to looking at longer time horizons with regards to thinking through budgets based on scenarios and actualities that are facing us. And I'd also like to add, we've got our permanent new chief executive that started on Monday, and this is an area that she is obviously particularly going to be robust about, because it's a area of focus for the remainder of this financial year for us as an administration. But no, we're not averse to looking at that longer time frame as part of our engagement.
Thank you, Conrad.
We don't have the information to calculate a reliable financial target for next year, other than the pretty broad range being set there. Exactly as the mayor says, it's clearly, an impossible aspiration, although one would like to be able to do it, to set a budget for the next 5 years in certainty of future funding settlements from government, future allowances on legal council tax or anything like that. That can't be done. What can be done, and what we do, is make sure that when we are looking at those items over which we have more control, for example, long-term regeneration programs, where we have anticipations of costs and future revenues and so on, we absolutely build that into the financial strategy. Absolutely, although we calculate a budget for next year and a bit beyond, and that doesn't mean that we only look at the impact on next year. So, for example, we're always alive to how we can invest in, for example, preventative services that may have the ability to cut our long-term costs. So it's not, we're not thinking about a long-term financial strategy. I think it's just important to be clear about the extent to which that can be done. If you know of councils that say they've been able to calculate a target for the next 5 years and work on a budget to it, that's wrong, they can't.
Please.
Thank you. I had two questions, but actually that was the first one, because I think Cornwall has just said that they're going to be trying to do that to get 75 million savings up to 27-28. But the other question, and I think it's to Conrad, not to Zolfi, if that's okay, that in the summer there was the survey by the that went to all of the Sigoma group of local authorities, where they had about 10% back saying that they were considering a Section 114 this year, and 20% saying that they may be considering it next year. And 20% saying that they may be considering it next year. We obviously aren't part of those. If we had have received the survey, what would our answers have been?
So I don't think there's anything, as I said earlier, I don't think there's anything particularly unusual about Newham's financial position. I think right across the sector, we are seeing authorities talk about the potential need for a Section 114 notice at some point in the future. I've avoided speculating on that because I think it's unhelpful. But the general point, the sector is under enormous stress. We have seen, I think, in the last 3 years, 6 Section 114 notices, all of which can be ascribed to one form of mismanagement or another of the council's concern. But what you're highlighting from the Sigoma survey, I think completely rightly, many councils, not just for the Sigoma is a special interest group of metropolitan authorities, principally urban councils based in the north. We are seeing councils right across the country talk about the potential need to issue a Section 114 notice at some point in the next sort of 2 to 3 years or less in some cases. I personally think it's unhelpful to speculate about that in the way that some of them done about a particular local authority, because, back to the earlier point, there is so little that we know about future government spending intentions and indeed the general election, no more than say 15 months away or something like that. But the pressures that we face are very similar to those that all local authorities face. I think there are some particular pressures in Europe, as we'll come on to, around temporary accommodation, for example, and other issues that are more of a London and the South East issue than elsewhere. So I hope that answers the question. If I haven't picked you all up, then please let me know. I'll try and be more precise.
Can I come in there, barring speculation, and I get what you're saying, Conrad. You don't want to speculate unnecessarily to send the wrong messages. However, we as Scrutiny, are we the first persons that the general public and the outside bodies are going to say, what assurances did you get? And couldn't you have foreseen that the council was going in that directions, etc. So we need some assurances. And that is not speculation. So I suppose this may not be the meeting for it, but it just saw notice that we're going to see some clarification so that we are in a position to have the facts and so on to know where we're going as an authority.
So, yeah, I'm just looking at the reference. The best document that you can refer yourselves to in order to pick that up is the audit committee meeting. I'm just checking, I think it's 29th of June of this year. Item 7 on the agenda for that meeting, the going concern report, set out the totality of the council's reserves, and therefore, one can easily look at that, and if nothing changed, the council didn't deliver any savings, which of course won't be the case, but just as a sort of factual starting point, one can see at what point section 114 state would be reached. I do emphasise, and I think it's worth making the point because it's been badly misused in the press. The purpose of the section 114 legislation, part of the 1989 Act, was very much to deal with an entirely different circumstance. Politically, that relates to the events of the mid-80s and councils where, regrettably, councillors did not follow their lawful duties to set a balanced budget. And section 114 is there intended to give someone, chief finance officer, the ability to intervene and set a budget overriding that democratic process to ensure that it's lawful. Not really intended to be that if we've run out of money. I mean, there's no other piece of legislation for section 151 officers to rely on, and that's why it is being used. It's not actually the purpose of the legislation. I think it's really important to make that point.
Okay, so can I ask them, Conrad, to actually inform me, because I'm speaking with, discussing it with my fellow chairs, but obviously item 7 of that June audit report, for us to have either budget or the chairs some discussion with yourself and others to just to get a better understanding. That is to bring some assurance to us, so we don't speculate, but that is we speaking from a position of knowledge and understanding.
But just to be clear though,
But that's it's in the public domain. And what I'm asking for is a special briefing to dissect figures and understand it. Yes.
though, just to be clear though, the going concern was calculated before the July financial position.
Can you make a note?
So
That's correct, and the going concern report is written on the basis of no overspend, so one would have to deduct from
Yeah.
that.
So it may not be
You're quite right.
particularly useful.
Thank you. So the clerk is noting that the scrutiny wants to come back and arrange that sometime in the near future for us to do that. Rita. Okay, sorry, I thought you indicated. Right. Is there any other member on this? And we are just about running out of
Just a quick one,
time.
Chair. To finance, obviously, you implemented some financial restrictions and you extended those into September. What is your plan on that? Are you going to be rolling those over on a monthly basis? Is there any long-term view on that? Because it does, there is the planning, what I'm asking for, rather than on a month by month when you get the outturn, where is the planning on the restriction in our revenue?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. We announced the restrictions for obvious and well understood reasons, and the intention would be, of course, to move away from that as and when we've dealt with the government, and we've not yet done so. I think it is a fair point. It would be well worth considering, announcing those will stay in place rather than being reviewed month on month, for example, for a quarter and so on. And that's a fair comment to make, and we'll take that one into
Do you
account.
get worried if we go into Christmas with these restrictions still in place?
I think, it just depends on so many other factors. I mean, one might keep the restrictions in place because they were working and were starting to get the overspend down, for example. One might add to them if they weren't having desired effect and so on. So I think, that's probably a degree of speculation in there. But it is healthy to have these restrictions in place at the moment, and I agree. It is unlikely that in a month's time it would be reasonable to unwind.
Planning, so, so when do we stop going from month by month by month? When do we go, oh, it's going to be for 3 months, quarter or 6 months? When does that?
I've already acknowledged that that's fair. I mean, at the moment, we're just working on the basis of renewal, but I think it's a fair point that we ought to consider whether we just announce those for long.
That's correct. That is the last question on this list.
So I think in the papers, the only piece of new information that we hadn't already received was to do with temporary accommodation, and we've got some temporary accommodation people here. So unfortunately, I didn't see them until just now because they wasn't in my pack, so I haven't properly read through them. But I think that it was saying that the position was worse than we had within the July papers that we had kind of been estimating. So that's already showing us that things are, the higher risk is happening, that's happening. So I was just wanting to see if you had some updates for us in terms of how you're dealing with that. Yeah, do you want to?
Well, I think this is obviously one strand, which is quite a heavy one, but there are sufficient or quite a lot of mitigation plans in place, both in terms of what the housing service is doing and what we're going through the acquisition program. We're looking at various other avenues to make sure that we reduce the nightly accommodation costs, which are the biggest ones affecting us. So there are a number of streams in pipeline which are designed to reduce the impact as much as we can. Ultimately, the demand is very high, the property shortage is there, interests are high, rents are going up. So there are various issues, but clearly we're looking at this as a total picture.
How much has the forecast gone up over the past 2 months? Because I think it was only July that we got the previous one. And as I say, I haven't been able to read through it because it wasn't in my pack.
Andrew?
2 at the moment. Unfavourable.
So it was previously
4.3 million.
4.3.
from 4.3 to 6.2, is that right? So that's quite a big jump within just a few months. Are we expecting that jump again over the next few months? And is that kind of like a thing that we keep on impacting?
Do you mind if I comment? So just in relation to the civic question about will it go up again? Yes, the answer is yes. We have a clear pressure into the accommodation and we don't have enough provisions. That's just the way in which it is. It's not just us, it's all London boroughs. So yes, if we don't do something, if we don't try and do the things that we are doing, which you would have seen through the cabinet report that just came in September, if we don't start trying to, through our acquisition program, buy properties in order to keep people in properties, we're just going to be, that gap is just going to get bigger and bigger. Are we trying to mitigate? Yes. The papers that you received, there were 5 mitigating proposals in there, of which we're doing. 2 of them has already been done, and those processes are going on in August, and the rest are due to kind of get to the place where they need to be by around October. So it's a process over a year period to try and bridge that gap in the temporary accommodation space. And if all goes well, that will give us mitigating factors of around £16 million, as you would have seen in the documents. But it would be remiss of me to turn around and say, well, actually, no, it's all going to work out. Well, it's not, because people coming into the service at a rate of around about 500 to 550 presentations a month at the moment. That equates to around 6.
I think that the problem, the concern presumably is not that the cost will keep going up, because of course we forecast that the cost will keep going up because we know that there's, weekly kind of people coming into the system. It's that the gap between what we forecasted and the actual cost or a new forecast, that's where the problem is.
So we do forecast, but we forecast on a certain amount. So as it currently stands, we forecasted on around £203 for nightly accommodation. That's those that are in commercial hotels.
The reality is, if we have more people coming into the front door, that require that service, it could go up even more. It all depends on how many people come through the door and how many we have a duty to. So, you know, I'm not going to say to you, it's not going to be, but and also I could come back next month or the month after and actually we could be in that reduction. So we just don't know what we know until we know it.
Right. Before anyone has come in, we are over time on this, and I see Terry and I see Thelma, and I did say this is going to. So they're we going to about 8 o'clock now.
Okay.
So basically, I mean, your hands.
I'll be brief, Chair. You mentioned Councillor Parkin, thank you for that answer. You mentioned about acquisitions, but I remember watching the July cabinet meeting, the section 151 actually replied to you and said, we can't buy our way out of this problem, right? So acquisitions is not going to be the solution. It may be part, but it will not be the solution. And if you look at the London property market and the strategic shifts in it, the impact of tax changes to landlords, the lack of supply, there are some major structural changes in the London property market. In mind, we have one of the highest private landlord sectors. We are susceptible more than other boroughs. Can I just ask, what else have you got in the locker? Because every month, it looks like, if you project out, it's going up. We all get the answer, it depends on presentations. We know presentations will go up. So my question is, if we continue like this, it will worsen. We all know that because it was said in the July meeting. If we continue like this, the temporary accommodation will have a severe impact on the council's finances. So my question is, what else is coming? We keep hearing about some schemes.
Can you
of the magnitude to solve the problems? My question is, what do you need? What more resources do you need? What do you need to solve it?
But so
And before you answer the question, can I bring Thelma in? Is this about temporary accommodation? I bring it Thelma and then. Oh, yeah.
Related to temporary accommodation and acquisition. So recently we secured 39 self-contained units for temporary accommodation, which is significantly cheaper than the commercial hotels, which is fantastic, it's amazing, but it's only 39. So my question is, what is our plan to like get more of these? Because it's a great opportunity, especially given the fact that we're probably competing with other councils for these opportunities. What is our actual plan to make sure we secure more of these to help us with our urban crisis?
So to answer both questions in totality, I will take part of it because obviously I am the temporary accommodation part of it, but Shabs is the acquisitions. So through this process, what we've done is we've tried to maximise many options. So this is not just a one size fits all, you know, and it would be remiss of me, sorry, Chair, to let's not forget why we are in the position we are. This is because of central government not funding the housing for many different years. You can shake your head, Councillor Paul, but we can have that argument outside this room. So just in regards to where we're at and how we got here, we're not no different to anywhere else. London Council's reports recently where they talk to, there is a borough amount of TH within London, and it's only going to continue growing. So in regards to I don't know if you've read the papers that I provided. There are 5 options that we've given, which is that of buying property outside of the borough, which is about maximising value for money. Also direct purchasing, which you saw that it came to cabinet recently, and that's through the right to buy properties, and then those of private landlords that are deciding that they want to give up their properties. We're trying to buy back some of those properties also. We also have a programme around diverting general needs voids into the TA cohort, and that's around 35% of voids that come into that general needs pot, and they will go into the TA. And then we also have the offers that we get from registered providers that are coming in. We're taking a percentage of those offers directly and using for the TA. So they're the things that we're doing currently. Is there more that we can do? There are more that we are investigating to do, if we possibly can. The problem here is it's not just a one size fits all, and there are political decisions that we need to make in this space. So if you're taking away from one and giving to another, you've got to balance that out. But even having said that, we still have a quota of properties that we still provide for those, for instance, that I know you've had conversations about in previous other meetings around care leavers, for instance, and those in foster care and so on and so forth. We're still keeping that cohort so that there are properties coming out for those young people, especially that we owe a duty to. But, you know, in regards to buying more, if it comes up, we are actively looking for more. So that was what we could do right this second. It was a deal that we found out about, and so therefore we went for it. And we are continuously looking for more properties in that cohort of the accommodation that will cost us less. Shabs, do you-
Yeah, what I was going to say, look, I think the acquisitions programme, we started out last term. We felt there was a need, the cost of temporary accommodation and the effect it was having on the general fund. So the programme was set up last term, but it's always been a slow process. But this time round, we bring finance, housing, all our partners together to actually drive it forward. Also, we are looking at everything, i.e. HRA, council buybacks, buying commercial, buying properties through developments that are ready to go. So we are looking around the borough. But for me, the main thing is keeping residents in the borough and buying in borough as well. And I think, you know, when I have residents come into my surgery, I think the most important thing here is keeping families in this borough and the effects it has sometimes when you do have to move families at the borough, especially on children. So for me, it's really, really key that we continue by building the supply up, and also it's about driving up standards, because, you know, we are, as like most boroughs, reliant on PRS, the private rented sector. And if we're buying brand new properties, we're driving up the standards. So we want to really set high standards, decent home standards, to make sure that our residents are living in good, decent properties. Thank you.
Thanks. Lovely.
I'll be very brief, Chair. I think my colleagues have already outlined. Clearly, this is something that we do need to continue to work on, and which we are doing. In terms of street acquisition, we have over 280 properties that we bought. There's another 300 or so which are actually in the pipeline, but there is more work done in terms of prevention of the homelessness. That officers are working on that basis. You've seen the cabinet report a couple of weeks back in terms of the HRA that my colleague mentioned here. We are actually supporting tenants now who have been given notice of eviction. If the landlords are willing to sell those properties, we're going out to actually buy those to make sure that they fit for the purpose and meet our PRS standards. And downsizing, for example, these are another options that people are looking at. So I don't think we're leaving anything out of it, but we're continually assessing the situation, looking at any other option that's available, best practice anywhere else, to make sure that we minimize the gap that we can. But ultimately, clearly, the demand is high. If people have a right to be housed, then clearly we do need to provide that accommodation. It's our statutory duty, as my colleague said. But at the same time, we're looking at every option to minimize the cost, including, for example, the review of the hotels, the nightly charges.
Can we answer that, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll bring this to close.
Chair, just clarify the information question on the borough culture.
No more question and answers. That's it.
So I believe there's an information request made on the borough culture. There's how much the council's committed to in terms of the bid, but also maybe the programme. So I want to clarify with
It is the initial cost of writing, financial cost, the cost of staff resources in getting to the bid, the actual cost of delivering the programme in 2025, and all costs associated with us delivering the bid, the borough culture, all direct and indirect costs which could have an impact on the borough's financial position.
The other action was a meeting with Conrad.
Yes, and he's got that already. Yeah, thank you.
And just on the first set of questions relating to the Borough of Culture bid, some of those questions we will be able to provide information sooner rather than later. The questions relating specifically to cost of 2025, we will not be able to provide those until we're nearer to submission date, as long as that's clear. And then outside of this meeting, officer colleagues that support the executive can liaise with scrutiny officers in order to set out some realistic timeframes?
So, and one of the things is in terms of our actions, when can we get the process? I understand the 2025, when can we get the first response?
So I imagine we can get those within the timeframe as set out in the protocol. I think that's what, 10 days, 7 days, whatever is in the protocol guidance.
Information share, or do we have to create that
Next meeting.
And Conrad, the meeting in terms of the audit report, the scrutiny office is going to get it. And I leave that for your office and scrutiny a range of time in the very near future.
Can I just be clear? Members attending that, is that members of this, all members of the commission, or who are we expecting at that meeting?
But at the first stage, it will be the chairs.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not intended for the entire commission. Okay, so thank you all for this. We have I cover a wide question the budget. And I now would go on to item 5, Councillor Lee Parkway. This very important.
It's not very important, but I just wanted to just extend my hand for some of those questions that may not have been able to get asked this evening. Happy to take them in written format, Councillor Masters, if you would like, if it's to do with temporary accommodation, and then I will respond to them in writing.
Yeah, sorry, was I allowed to ask my question?
No, you're not. What?
No, she's saying in written, she can.
I'm happy.
Oh, that's fine. I can sort of send it to you now. Quite honestly.
Any questions that hasn't been asked?
It's totally different. It's a whole new line of questioning.
Okay, and I
Takes some time.
cannot open a new line of questioning just yet with the time constraints. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for attending this session. We now go into item 5. Remember, we reversed the order. This item is to consider the first quarter building a fair new performance report for the municipal year of 2023-24 and covers the period for August to June 2023. At the beginning of the administrative year, the mayor is requested to set out our intentions of what she will be delivering this year in respect of the building the fair and new delivery plan. The mayor's report this evening forms part of the scrutiny function role of ensuring accountability of the executive. The committee will now hear from the mayor on how she will deliver on the corporate plan and manifesto commitment here, what our priorities are this year, how she will measure success and what good looks like. Also, the committee is particularly interested to ask questions on 1, what key strategic organizational changes need to be made to deliver on this vision for Newham? 2, how do senior staffing structure and staffing continuity have an impact on the ability to deliver the priorities? And 3, how is the council changing its organizational culture to better meet the objectives of the organization? And I can repeat those at any time if you want me to repeat them. Yeah. And over to you, Mayor, and in terms of presentation or in terms of your opening remarks, 3 minutes is allowed.
Okay, fine. A PowerPoint presentation has been circulated to just support the papers that were submitted previously and in advance of this session. And thank you very much once again, members of Overview Scrutiny, in inviting me and colleagues to talk through the Q1 report relating to performance outcomes, and in sum, the overall vision for Newham and the main key strategic delivery approaches and expected outcomes. The vision as set out across the 8 missions of the Building a Fairer Newham programme, corporate plans, underpinned, anchored by the commitment to, one, ensure that Newham becomes the best place in the world for a child and young person to grow up. Two, maintain our absolute commitment to anti-poverty and addressing inequality, including health inequalities. Three, the obligation, duty, contributions that we need to be making in the context of the biggest crisis facing humanity and the planet, the climate emergency, and ensuring sound financial management of finances. In terms of the main key strategic delivery approaches, will be the focus of this remaining municipal year. Again, in some, they are reflective of the corporate plans, but elevated. One, a clean borough. Two, robust, sound financial management. And three, excellent resident experience as we continue to transform the organisation, because we want it to be best in class, best first time, world class, fit for purpose for the 21st century. And we absolutely know that as part of the journey of transformation that we have commenced since 2018, notwithstanding, the pause because of 3 years of COVID-19, there's a lot to be done. The outcomes that we intend to achieve or hope to achieve are the ones as set out in the outcomes-based performance framework. So happy to take further questions. There is a slide deck that's been circulated by a scrutiny officer through the chair. If I may, I think it would be helpful to go through that slide deck so that we can just drill down on some of those areas, because it will very much help support the response to the key lines of inquiry that I was provided last week. So I'll just pause there.
In terms of going through the slide deck, what do you mean?
There was a PowerPoint presentation that basically is a summary of the documents that were sent before. And if I can just confer with James Partis, the Chief Transformation Officer.
Yeah, there's a kind of brief presentation that takes us through most of the answers to the key lines of inquiry that have been put to us, which are imminently sent to Michael. I can also share them directly on the screen if helpful, depending on time. I'll probably get it done in 5 minutes if that's helpful.
Yeah.
We all attended
Appendix.
the dockside to this presentation.
Yeah, there's a
Corporate plan.
Yeah, we're fine.
presentation in the
Questions.
summary. There's a also summary.
We've read our paper.
Chair, can I just clarify, is this appendix 2 we're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a simple summary of that which has not been circulated, but it's been sent to the.
If I may, if it's possible, if one of the slides in the slide deck can be put on screen, because it will help us just.
I mean, what I'm weary to do, because members are keen to ask questions, and because we have had the agenda papers, and I'm just being informed that just before the meeting, you send the slide deck. The member hasn't attended the forum and to ask, please form any supplementary. If you put the the slide deck, the particular slide that the mayor is referring to, and then we will go to questions.
I'm also happy to share them on the screen if helpful.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking Michael to do.
And it will be slide 4.
Actually, yeah, Michael, I don't have sharing rights.
Sharing rights.
Okay.
So whilst Michael is doing that, over to members. So whilst that deck is coming up, I've seen Council Master starting the clock already.
There are some really disturbing statistics in here, like, for example, on page 46, we've got a complete collapse in the proportion of residents who think we're doing a good job, from 78% in 2019 down to 30% now. Under crime, we've got that only 28% feel safe in their local area at night, and it drops even further to 20% of women feeling safe. And then, you know, in terms of financial resilience, only 45% feel that they're financially resilient. These are all really, really poor things to what a council is trying to do. And I'm just wondering, particularly in terms of the collapse, in terms of the people who think we do a good job, how you would account for that?
If I may, it would be really helpful if member colleagues could justify specific pages, because there's the main report and then appendices that they're referring to.
Would be
Okay, so
and then
that's from the Susan Mason speaking. Yeah, go on.
and yeah, it would be really helpful if there could be some clarity and directional pages prior to the questions being asked, and then I'm happy to provide some initial commentary, and then I will be passing on to James Partis, our Chief Transformation Officer.
So, okay. So can I give some clarity on that? And some members, would they be able to refer to page specifically? And some members may not, because they might be stuff that they read elsewhere or read here, and they may not be able to refer to a page. But where we can, from the masters, and not 2 meetings.
Sorry.
Yes, where we can, if we can give the page number, then please can we do so?
I did give a page number for page, yeah, 56 in Terry's report, 46 in my report. The crime,
So it's going to be different pages.
crime statistic is 37.
Okay, so I'm so sorry, Chair, because I'm just hearing quite a lot of different contributions. What 2 page numbers were referred to with regards to?
46. My report in my agenda.
What page in your agenda?
Is that an appendix 1?
46.
My colleagues seem to have 56. This is within the people powered participation year 2 outcomes.
In terms of clarity.
I'm sure people are aware of this. If you look at the page within people powered participation in the actual slide
So
pack.
is it appendix 1?
Yeah.
And it's the online version.
The bottom hand corner.
So it's appendix
Plummeting of residents being satisfied with the way we're running.
You open the appendix, it's page 22.
22
Yeah, that's all
in the
there.
PDF. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so Chair, if I may,
Yes.
right. So I think it's important for us to firstly just set out some context around the apparent shift. Well, the shift in figures 2019 and figures as presented in the report, but for the current year, because there's an important explanation around methodology and the baseline of 2019, which following interrogation, it's been discovered that there were quite a lot of flawed and weak methodological approaches to the research and the analysis, and the Chief Transformation Officer can explain that. And that's has led or leads to this starkness in the comparison between 2019 and the current figures that we're looking at. And I think that's really important to note, because it can help avoid some of the interpretation that is easy to make if that explanation is provided. And I think there's a section in the report that sets the explanation around the methodology issue out in a lot of detail.
James?
So yeah, just to elaborate on that point, there's obviously quite a substantial time gap between the 2 measures. 3 years, COVID, quite an important injury, kind of a global and national event. And there have been some methodological changes in the way the survey has been undertaken, which I do think provide a bit of context to the difference. some of those impacts around COVID and impact on trust and satisfaction in government generally. There's been a really significant national downturn in trust and satisfaction in government and public services, partially driven by national confidence and national issues, but also driven by, the year of cessation of service delivery, which was the characteristic of what most councils had to do during that period. And there's substantial benchmarking data that can be offered up to kind of show that that's not just a kind of local issue, it's a national one. In terms of methodology, the key change in that particular survey from 2019 to 2022, and some of this has to be kind of pieced together because we've only got broad references to the previous methodology, was the 2019 survey was primarily a sort of direct face-to-face phone survey, manually recorded outcomes from conversations based on a number of questions asked. The 2022 survey was primarily pushed to digital, encouraging residents to engage with the survey through an online means, responding to post and phone chasers. And there is quite a substantial amount of evidence that produces much more honest responses. You're able to kind of be more objective and critical when you're engaging with a form than you are with a person. I think the key thing I'd say is the upcoming resident survey that's about to conclude its field work will be really useful because it will give us a kind of continued baseline to work from. And it will be the second time the survey has been undertaken in the same way, in terms of that kind of push to digital, and will reflect a kind of position post all of that kind of significant national change which has occurred. There's obviously lots of conclusions you can draw from contrasts like that. In terms of kind of what the implications are from residents in terms of their personal experiences. And one of the key things that are a feature of this year's research programme is to undertake much more qualitative research with residents who've answered that question. The last thing I'll say is the 30% marker is only one part of the survey result for that question. Another third of residents indicated they were kind of in a more middle ground indifference around satisfaction, and another third said they were dissatisfied. So that 30% is only showing you one of the answers that the question gave. And what we don't know from the 2019 survey is what were the other options for the answers given for the satisfaction question. We know what the ratio for answers saying positive satisfaction were, but it's a bit of a technical response. That hopefully helps the initial comments made.
You said you don't know the question that was asked, but it was this administration and this this council. So you wouldn't have had to go back that far to find the question to make the comparison. And I know the methodology is different, and you will easily put that the methodology is different. But suppose the methodology wasn't different. What is your best guess? How would the residents have answered? And I suppose, because what you're saying is bad because it's different methodology. And we hear that. Yeah. So I'm thinking, you know what, if it was the same methodology, would they have answered better or worse?
I mean, if I may, just to kick off, and I will defer to James Partis in his role as the Chief Transformation Officer, who works closely with his team in interrogating the information coming through from the current approach that we and the method that we adopt for the survey. I would hazard a guess the perceptions, experiences, feelings about crime and safety for not only residents in Newham but elsewhere in London would be pretty much low because of the pretty shocking issues that we've been exposed to concerning the police over recent years. And I think that would also influence the survey question around how women feel safe or not in their localities generally. And I would imagine that they would be similarly low because safety issues are as much to do with the work and the visibility of the police. And the Metropolitan Police has realised that public trust has utterly collapsed, as has the Baroness Casey in terms of her review. And there's a huge mountain to climb in terms of reversing that. but I don't know whether you'd like to build on that.
I think we've got enough and a half other members are seen for the charter hall. And then charter for.
Thank you, Chair. And I think I take the point, Mayor, that there are always external factors to every single indicator here that could exasperate or benefit a situation. But I want to go back to this question around methodology and the change. Now, yeah, that happens in all research, you refine as you go along. But am I right in thinking from what you've said that we don't have access to the previous questions that were asked or a demographic profile? We don't have that information?
If I may, just by way of it, providing some additional context, and then I'll invite the Chief Transformation Officer. So the 2019 survey would have been commissioned at a point in 2018, and it was a survey methodology that the new administration inherited, and it was pretty much in progress, because I remember it would have been July of 2018 when I was given a full update around the household survey process underway that would then produce the results for 2019. I mean, I don't know the systems in terms of file management, and the Chief Transformation Officer.
Actually answer the question.
I wasn't intending to answer the question specifically. I was just providing some context, and I wanted to pass back on to the Chief Transformation Officer.
James.
Yeah, so in terms of access to previous data, what we have readily available is kind of the high level findings from the survey. So particularly for the positive answer satisfaction, that's readily available. The breakdown of those who are sort of neither dissatisfied or satisfied and have specific kind of demographics behind it, that isn't something that's readily available. Mostly, I think, because a range of the officers that were working on previous surveys no longer work for the council, file management and transfer over to the new arrangements wasn't particularly robust. I'm sure with sufficient investment evidence, there possibly is some record on historic data systems that we've yet to explore, may not have been fully deleted. But the readily available evidence is just a sort of high level findings, if that makes sense. The other kind of issue, I suppose, in terms of like for like, is what we don't have records of are individual survey responses. Because of the methodology change, we have that now for every single participant that takes part, because it's digital. It can be very easily relate back to authenticity. I'm not questioning the authenticity of previous surveys, but we don't have the same level of granularity, if that makes sense, of the individual survey responses that we do currently. So I'm happy to kind of provide a much more sort of detailed briefing on this particular issue to give you that methodological comparison and give you the data that we do have. But sorry, I hope that answers your question.
Rita.
So leaving that aside, I think it might be helpful to get a bit more of a detailed briefing for the submission. So going forward, clear on what the transformation was. But leaving that completely aside, and if we just take at face value the data that we see in front of us, they're still shocking figures.
Yeah.
They're still shocking figures to say that our residents are happy. We can't mask that, can we? Any deflection about external events or issues around methodology still say our residents are not happy.
So if I may, the explanation around methodology and context is not intended to be a deflection. The fact that we actually publish these on a quarterly basis is a demonstration of our transparency and owning where the councils are in terms of satisfaction rates as experienced or expressed by residents. And I would absolutely concur that these are not, great figures, percentage range across a number of the key areas, make for really sobering reading. And it very much underpins the reason why we're demanding from the officer corps better, faster improvements, because we know that our residents want to see them as much as we do as well. So there's no hiding, there's no deflection. It's additional context, not to deflect, but to just enrich understanding of the data and whatever interpretation one wants to make on that, but the figures talk for themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Chair,
Terry.
question to James, actually. Your question on methodology, my confidence just plummeted in the whole survey. So I'm now not sure which metrics have been affected or haven't been affected. So my question is, how credible and relevant are the slides in front of us? Because this methodology hasn't just affected that budget, I suspect it's affected the whole thing, right? So I want to know how robust is this? Should we just start again? Because our confidence, I'm not sure what's going on here. Secondly, the generic point with survey. When you do a new survey and you change the method of collection, there are ways to rebase the survey to get a consistency.
Yeah.
Right? So what have we done, right? And I think in this detailed note, I would like to know what the guidelines you're following from the research association.
Yeah.
Because there are other implications with surveys in this council, right? Not just here. And I'm slightly concerned that we can't manage a survey, we can't manage changing methodology, and actually you've got no way or no confidence in tools to measure the corporate performance. So really, I welcome the note on methodology and perhaps look at the chief executive to know where else is this methodology corrupting our data. So just, yeah, it's not, basically, is it worth us continuing looking at data if it's all skewed?
Back on that. So completely get your comments on the concerns and issues about previous methodology and the value of baselining against that previous survey that these issues raise. Completely get that. What I can say with confidence is the 2022 survey is based on industry best practice standards and is fully transparent. Individual survey records anonymised can be reverted back.
Or 22.
The 2022 one, the one that shows the current position.
The president think we're doing a not value for money is correct.
Yeah, the 2022 survey is a very reliable, methodologically accurate survey. So the current outcomes, yeah.
The president don't think you're doing a good job.
No, that's the 2019 survey. So that's a like-for-like comparison with the previous figure. If there are concerns about methodology, do you want to come in on that?
If I may, Chair. So in some, there were flaws and weaknesses. 2019 survey. It's presented here in this report by way of a comparator to 2022, because the period in between, we weren't able to undertake any surveys because of COVID-19, et cetera, et cetera. Take 2022 as the new baseline. We are currently out conducting the 2023. We're anticipating an initial report which will provide us insight into emerging findings with a view to producing 2023 by the spring. So 2022 is the most robust baseline that you should measure things against.
Right. Okay. So we are saying, so we're accepting as fact, but only 30% of residents are satisfied with the way the council run things.
We're accepting as fact the outcome of the 2019 survey that states that, but we're also accepting it was a flawed survey methodology, and we're not placing credibility on it because we've now designed a survey approach and methodology which we think and we believe meet industry best practice and high standards.
2022 result is on good methodology or the bad?
Good, it's on the best standard.
Okay, so so
basically, okay, so what the mayor is saying, okay, let's refresh. Take 2022 as the baseline going forward. and you'll be judged against 2022 as the baseline. You were saying that the 2019, that methodology has been flawed, your words, and although it's there, you're not putting too much emphasis on it. You're okay, and so that's what you're telling us. However, I suppose what members on this side is trying to say, when you compare the 2019 or the 2022, they are shocked and surprised that the 2022 figures is as alarming as they are, and they are concerned. And so that is what we are saying. So what we're expecting, if the 2022 is concerning to us, we're hoping that the 2022 will be better, because if they were worse, then it would be even more shocking, because members are concerned.
Chair, can I just intervene? I actually think it's more confusing than that, because the terminology on the one on page 56 says the increase in people satisfied with the way councils survey, but we're not measuring the satisfaction, we're measuring the level of increase. So can I just make a suggestion? I don't think we can do this justice.
Clarify that.
It's way too confusing. I would recommend that, can we bring this back, take out all reference to 2019, let you put 2022 as a baseline, but also look at some of these descriptors, because the header is completely different to the descriptor underneath.
Could we have the raw data tables as well?
Yeah.
Check it ourselves.
Yeah, sure.
Chair.
Right, before you come in, we have Tillman, then you come in and see the Tillman.
So today we've been talking a lot about the crisis, how much our residents are struggling. And one way to really deal with this is to empower residents themselves when it comes to employment. So on page 30, it's talked about new work, and that it was anticipated, the target was 1,500 people would secure a job, but it ended up being 841 residents. It's still an achievement, but we're 659 under what we anticipated. And on the same page, you can see that the new employments count has gone up. So it's gone up now to 16,630, 850 more residents who are in employment. So what are we going to do about new work so that it works better for our residents so that they can start securing jobs? But if you look at page 40, it says that 28% of residents strongly agree they know how to know where to find a good a matching job, and the average income is £15.50. 45% of residents are living comfortably or doing all right financially. So we can really see that our residents are struggling. The average income is not very high. Residents don't really know how to find, the matching job. So what are we going to do to make new work more effectively in actually getting residents your jobs?
Happy to come in on that one. So yeah, connecting very helpfully some outcomes across the framework around employment outcomes and economic growth outcomes. Our new and work performance obviously is not where we want it to be in terms of numbers of residents securing jobs through work. There are additional outcomes underneath that outcome, which I think are useful to also reference, particularly around meaningful work and work at living wage and young people into work, which I do think give us a bit more confidence that there is some targeted employment support offered from the services having a better impact than the overall global figures show. The kind of major findings there, I think, do point to some wider economic factors around the availability of employment and the impact of kind of inflationary pressures on the economy, which is clearly challenging. If Vicky Clark, our corporate director of Inclusive Economy, was here, she would also reference to the fact that there are improvements that are definitely required around the operating model for that particular service and the practice it uses at the front door to kind of make sure that residents are really proactively engaged in opportunities at the earliest stage of the kind of employment support pathway. There has been a review of that service, which is recently concluded. There will be a kind of redesign of the skill sets needed in the team to kind of deliver the work more effectively and develop even more kind of far-reaching partnerships with employers to kind of deliver better outcomes. But you're right, the overall position we're showing here is one where we're not meeting an ambitious target, but one that we want to meet.
So sorry. Can I continue, Chair?
Yes, you may.
So just on the back of that, is it more targeted for service or is it how people are engaging with it? So for example, on page 29, it says first time entrance to the youth justice system, that it's really high and it's higher than London and the national average. But then when you go to page 4, it says 96% of young people feeling safe at their youth. So it seems like when you look on the whole, not doing very well when it comes to the youth justice system. However, when it comes to the people that are accessing the youth zones, that looks really positive. So is it what is it about getting residents to actually engage, or is it about the central delivery?
Yeah, let's come back on that. Yeah, so on the entrance into the youth justice system, I think what we're seeing there is a kind of almost like global problem that children and young people face in the borough, particularly around kind of the determinants of access to support, the way in which young people are engaging with the council and education, other systems, to kind of avoid, trajectories that lead to, crime and those sorts of outcomes. And that is a very significant long-term piece of work that the council has to work with our partners, youth safety boards and others to kind of achieve change around schools and otherwise. That's a long-term challenging outcome which we're moving in the right direction on. The outcomes around feelings of safety in our youth centres or engagement with our services shows that when we are managing to kind of engage proactively with young people, support them into accessing those support pathways that can help them identify other opportunities, actually that's having a personally positive outcome and impact on them. And I think it's a pointer towards the fact that we have a model there that potentially, if it continues to grow and scale, could actually help us with that bigger global problem. So that's how I'd connect the two. Yeah, that's how I'd connect the two of those.
And if I may just to add, the outcomes that you're seeing with regards to the youth empowerment service is very much indicative of our upstream early intervention preventative public health approach. And over time, there will be, we hope, a correlation with reductions of our young people entering the youth justice system. But we also know that the global issue with justice system facing young people, there's a prominence disproportionately of young people in the criminal justice system, particularly young people of colour. And then just talking to the points raised by Councillor Chadder, I know that James is happy to just provide an explanation or clarification on that.
Yeah, just very quickly, that phrase increase in satisfaction, you'll see that sort of phraseology, increase, decrease. That's the intended outcome we want to achieve through the corporate plan. So we want to see satisfaction increase, which I know is not helpful in terms of referring to the specific question in the survey, but that's the reference. It's the direction of travel we want to achieve. And I agree, actually, the language we use in the report could be much clearer to direct to the specific question in the survey that refers to, but it's the intended direction that's trying to achieve is what that.
Before, there's a number of people that I'm seeing. So I've seen just about everyone now. There's there's Danny, there's Liz, there's the mayor. Everyone wants to come in. So the chief exec, and then I'll come back to you, Rita.
Sorry, I'm doing an awful job just quietly during my first meeting, but I just wanted to provide some clarity around the first time entrance. So the first time entrance is not really indicative of how we feel safe, but it actually is more an indication of how we are being policed in now. So there's a massive report you've all seen with David Laming report about disproportionality in the criminal justice system. It provides that indication. So I would be mindful that we look at youth safety and young people going into the justice system as two issues, the same issue. One indicates how young people can be policed, which is going to stop and search, etc. The other is actually that they have a safe space where they feel contained. So I just wanted to provide that clarity in hand and go back.
Okay, right. Chief Exec, can I put you on notice? There would be 2 questions from me for you.
Of course.
So, in fact, were you here as an observer or as the chief exec? Which one?
I'm the chief exec and I'm also with my first meeting.
Okay.
He's only been here for 2 years.
Let's go easy. Rita, I'll continue with Rita.
Yeah, can we move standing orders?
Sure. Yes. Are there any mover standing orders? Yeah. Yes. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Half an hour.
So, I mean, to my mind, carrying on discussing this when we're not confident in the terminology or the phrase is actually doing a disservice to everybody in this room, and I don't think that's fair personally. Two actions I would ask that this is brought back to us at the earliest convenience. Strip out the infographics. As a council, we use 90 words when we could use one. Strip it all out. And what I'd like to know is what our residents say. So never mind, of course, we should have corporate targets of what we want to achieve, but just what is the level of residents' action? Just that. And also, I'd actually like to refer this whole issue also to the audit committee as well, because I think there's an issue here about file management, about what things that actually is a business continuity issue as well, which I think we need to look at as well.
And just thinking aloud, one of the things we talk about staffing and culture and so on. Yeah, but we come back to that later. Susan.
Sorry, I'm about to burst. I've been wanting to come in since Perry and his metrics. I've got a whole list of last time we met, I came up with a list of objections to the metrics, and I'm still objecting. You know, how can we talk about exclusions without looking at demographics? Yeah. How can we talk about use of leisure centres without looking at who's actually using them? In terms of the citizens' assemblies, the people we've polled are the people who are actually taking part. I mean, surely it's the people who are not in the room who we should be sort of speaking to. In terms of hate crimes, there's no breakdown of which groups they're sort of directed against. And then we've got all this talk of strategies that aren't ready on, you know, got the sex worker strategy not ready till spring 2024. Why are we doing a damp and mould consultation? What do we need to consult on? You know, we know there's a problem, we know there are solutions. Why aren't we just getting on with fixing it? In terms of investing all the play areas across the borough, this has been a huge issue this summer that has been had a massive impact on East Ham. And yet, apparently, even though parks have openly admitted that all our parks are coming to the end of their natural life, we're apparently not going to be sort of investing till 2026. And, you know, when you speak to parks and say, where's your strategy? Where's the funding? They don't have anything prepared. It's just, yeah. I think I've sort of run out of steam, but I mean, you take my point. It just feels there's an all over failing with metrics, and it feels like what we're producing half the time is strategy and not delivery.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think it would be really helpful if, you know, the sheet that the member is referencing in terms of the list of questions, if that can be submitted and we can provide written responses, taking on board what Councillor Chadder has said, we can come back happy to, and to strip it bare, for want of a better word. I appreciate and hear the frustration in terms of what you're hearing from parks versus what you're hearing from the corporate centre. That's something that I will discuss with the relevant corporate directors along with Chief Executive and James in his role as the Chief Transformation Officer around coherence and consistency of what is being communicated to members. Because the manifesto commitment relating to upgrading of all of the parks, for you to be told it's going to start in 2026, which is the final year of, this term, seems bonkers, and it certainly doesn't echo or reflect, it doesn't reflect what I understand.
Liz, then.
Thank you. I think when it comes back, would it be possible for us to be able to see lots of numbers within it as well, in terms of how many people were surveyed, but not only that, how many were sort of used the service as a, in terms of out of the whole population? One of the ones that I was concerned about was not seeing any numbers, people that were using the youth empowerment service, for example. So we're looking at a percentage there, but we don't have the numbers in front of us. And kind of it would be useful within the comments section that when we're looking at the numbers, that we also know what the target is for how many young people actually we think need this service as well. So we know what kind of, percentage of those children are using it.
And if I may, that nuanced textured data analysis will be held by the service area itself as part of its service level agreements with corporate centres. So there is that richness of data, but for the purposes of this quarterly performance report, if we were to do that for it will be a massive kind of Bible. But yes, we can bring that.
But yeah, the data's all held. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think though that just to make it clear, though, I think that this percentage doesn't mean anything if we don't know the underlying number of how many people it is.
Yeah.
Even just that basic data, I think would mean that we would understand what that was.
Yeah. So helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've seen other hands. Andy.
I don't think it's going to be much of a surprise that I'm going to talk about the absolute collapse of the planet. We've got sufficient evidence that offsets planned globally won't even have enough land to be carried out. Fundamentally, mitigation should always come second over reduction. And the implications with mitigation at the current rate states that more than 60% of our borough will actually be underwater in 28 years. That's pertaining to the flat ground of the borough itself. So when we benchmark £500,000 for trees in schools, surely that trees should be lining our streets anyway, and not just be putting labels on them as offsets. And is this really enough money being invested? And the final question will be as well, any leftover money will go to people power places. Without the people power places projects being selected, how do we know if they're going to be climate offsetting in the first place?
Happy to start on that. Yeah, I think there's really important points around how we kind of measure the impact of our climate action programme and climate action strategy, which I would sort of concur the current sort of monitoring and outcomes data around that whole programme doesn't sufficiently sort of reflect the breadth of action required, or is being planned rather within the council. So on the specific questions within the sort of elements of the programme that you've raised, it's probably best if I kind of refer back to the relevant service area to kind of suggest that a more comprehensive briefing around kind of all of the strands of the kind of climate action programme, including tree planting, the future approach to offsets versus other kind of investment kind of measurements of impact would be a really useful thing to do, but I'm probably not best placed personally to give you as comprehensive an answer as that question deserves.
If I may just to add to that, I know that the scrutiny that covers climate emergency and air quality are going to be meeting with us in due course. We have now in place our Director of Climate Action, working closely with him to get a report ready for council, representing and reflecting our 2023 report, climate emergency report. And it will be worthwhile him being engaged in that piece that James parties, so that we can provide you a comprehensive response. Because one of the things that he has been doing since he came into Newham, and very much reflective of a set of objectives for his first 6 months, is looking at everything that the council is doing in the context of the net zero, neutral and zero that we've got to achieve within the timeframes that we've announced.
And on people power places?
Yeah, no, and he's been looking at.
No, as in how can we earmark leftover money for projects when we don't know what the projects are, if they're carbon offsetting in the first place?
We will get the information because he's been interrogating that as part of his remit.
So I have spoken to the climate officer we're referring to, and I would like to know that we're not just going to throw a couple of projects where we stick a couple of trees in places. It needs to run through every infrastructure that's possible in every single department, or we are greenwashing as a corporate plan.
And just through the chair, to reassure all councillors, we're not in the business of greenwashing or any other type of washing. We're going to be presenting a very, very robust report in December, and it's not simply about a sprinkling of trees here and there.
Thank you. And tell us not here, so we then go on to Terry. Then come back.
Yeah, the chart is marked permanent exclusions from Newham School, bracket secondary code P13001. Just a request, please. Can we have the 22-23 data on the table? Can we have the ethnic breakdown, please? Can we have all schools, not just maintained, but academies, please? And just a note that Newham is above the London level for exclusions, and bearing in mind Newham population is more, let's say, ethnic than the country, it's worrying, but our exclusion rates are higher. And what I know, I've got the chair of children sitting in front of me. I'm sure she'll be using those figures to guide her future work on exclusion. Can we have that? Because they'll have got that data.
Yeah.
And you got the level, right?
Yeah, Mayor.
If I may, Chair, yes, we can provide that information. And may I just make a gentle request? I imagine, albeit I'm not certain, this area has been an area of focus over the period of the relevant scrutiny, and to avoid duplication of work by officers as it pertains to information already provided. Perhaps through the scrutiny officers and officers that support the executive, we can just do some coordination so that we're not having to produce reams and reams of duplicating information. But in some, yes, of course.
I accept the spirit of the mayor's response, but I would ask a direct question of James Partis, who is the data controller for this. I would like to ask a direct question of you, James Partis, to provide the information, Chair. I do not want, for the past 18 months, this organisation has managed to not supply the data when asked in various forms. So I'm being quite specific, Chair, in who I'm asking for the data, and I've been specific what I want, because it's taken us a long time, and I see Paul Leslie in committees, it's taken us 18 months to not move very far. And I say, Chair, I am concerned, the black man in this borough, about the potential exclusions of black boys. And I just want the data. So the chair of scrutiny here can continue her work. I like it to be transparent.
Chair, if I may, and obviously the Chief Transformation Officer will want to come in, but I just wanted to formally have it noted that I'm concerned, that members are concerned about the insufficient provision of data, and if I can request what areas of data or data sets have not been provided and at what scrutiny commission, then I will discuss with the chief executive in order to get to the bottom as to why that has happened.
Thank you. Can I, before you come in this, Councillor Paul has requested some data set from you, James. When will you be in a position to provide that?
The only thing I'd say in relation to this specific data set is I will need to go away from the meeting only to understand when the final submissions from our schools come into us to that particular year. The academic year concerned 22-23 concluded in this summer. I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm afraid I just can't guarantee exactly when that final data submission from schools comes in. Maybe to put on record in a response either the data itself or a guaranteed date by which the data will be finalised and available, if that is helpful. And individualised Chiswick is allowable to do so in the way that's been.
I suppose first of all you would find out whether you have the data, and if not, when you're likely to have it.
Yes.
So can you then, so that would take you about a week or so.
I can do that within timescales, yeah. A week is completely fine for that.
So to let us know either way.
All the protocol, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just suggest
Yeah.
that you speak to Vic about it because
Yeah.
we are, but specifically because we have a meeting booked in order to look at this, and that there's a specific issue that Councillor Paul is referring to that we've had difficulties with, and it has been to do with the delineation of the information. So we have been given generic information, but it's to do with the delineation.
And the breakdown, that's true.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but
No, it's fine, but just to say that is happening, so it'd be really good to coordinate that so that.
Can I come in, Chair? Sorry, if
Yes.
Just listening to the conversations, I do just want to give a level of reassurance to the members that this is actually an area that many of us as cabinet members, especially those of colour, councillor, that are very interested in and have picked up on. And if you would go back to the previous cabinet meeting that just happened at the beginning of this month, we spoke in quite depth about this and challenged some of what it is that was in this document. As much as, yes, it looks okay, it's not good enough. No child should be excluded. But so I just wanted to give a level of reassurance that it's not just you guys are trying to look at it. So
And to add, since 2018, we have never believed it's good enough, and we have been challenging schools. And there are forums in addition to the cabinet and the wider executive where we tease and look and interrogate this situation, as well as the Youth Safety Board. So please be assured. And actually, it's of benefit that there's the level of scrutiny 360 degrees because it is such an important matter.
Can I say this? I took a comment from the mayor, but only a year ago, the organisation did not know about its own exclusion level, didn't have an ethnic breakdown, and was not utilising its power to challenge exclusion into schools. That information only came out because of a previous scrutiny. I just want to put it on the record, Chair, that it hasn't been. I agree with the mayor. Actually, it hasn't been roses, but we just got. It's taken us a long time to get somewhere. And we never seem to be able to be transparent about the data.
Yeah, can I say, so far, the discussion, the way it's going, especially this particular item, just bring me back to an item that we'll be dealing with further on in the agenda, the Black Boys Commission.
Yeah.
And it is because of the exclusion, and the chief exec mentioned the police practice and the disproportionality, etc. And that's why we're doing the commission, to really look into these data and what my plea to the executive is that we're going to be reconvening this commission this autumn. And we would like the fullest cooperation from the executive in terms of data, and also speaking to external to be able to put this to bear as quickly as possible. Yes, and so in fact, going back to my list, so I have Terry, then it was Thelma, and then Liz.
That's then me, I think.
And Paul.
So on the topic of resident satisfaction, one of the things that a lot of us as members have been hearing is that residents are not happy with the streets and how clean it is. And one way to tackle this is actually encouraging recycling. I feel like we need to do more to enable residents to do this. But on page 29, it says the percentage of household waste spent on the use of composting is 23%. This is the lowest target. And there's plans for weekly recycling collection. My question is, what is this actually going to look like? Is it going to be like just a massive thing for everyone to just put everything in five? Is everything going to be separated out? If you go to boroughs just next to ours, you can see the different colour boxes for different things. Residents are actively engaged in actually making sure that their borough looks clean as well. So it's not just on the council, on them as well. At the moment, we're not enabling our residents to do that. We're not giving them the facilities. So what is this going to look like? What are these weekly recycling collections going to look like? And are we going to be consistent and keep on going with it?
Yeah.
Happy to give a response as much as I can, if that's okay. I mean, the weekly rollout, the rollout of weekly recycling is obviously a massive step forward from fortnightly. Living in the borough myself, you know, I see how quickly the recycling bins themselves are being filled up, and the consequences of them being filled up is that it often results in waste recycling, which could be recycled being put into general waste collection, and other kind of consequences that come from that, which has long-lasting impacts, doesn't it, on the environment and our ability to kind of achieve sustainable outcomes. So that in and of itself, I think, is a positive step, and it's built into the manifesto and budgeted, etc. The kind of breakdown of waste, there are other commitments in the plan to create separate food waste pilots, and start to pilot other kind of disaggregation of waste categories, to kind of quote back to you some of the examples from other places, which I completely agree will have a really beneficial impact in helping residents better engage with the recycling service itself and better understand which parts of that service to use. So this particular commentary doesn't pick up on all of that, but I'm happy to direct via a quick written response to the other actions that are going to take place around the recycling service designed to help.
It was just simply like, what would it look like? So would each resident get a different colour box for paper, for glass? Will there be enough like comms out there so residents know on the recycling happening, what's it going to be like?
Yeah, happy to just provide a written briefing, and it would probably take me too long to try kind of describe exactly what it will look like from day one of that service, but and also how that will change. Just in the interest of time, I think perhaps a quick and timescales.
If you can know that, when would you provide that by?
That can be done within the protocol requirements. Yeah.
Okay, right. I bring Paul in, and this would be the last on that, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back to the previous discussion, when providing the data, can you include suspensions in that data?
Yeah,
really important that we actually understand what's happening internally, because that then leads to the continuation of the exclusion cycle for particularly young Black boys. In terms of voluntary sector data, I can't quite see it in the data set, but actually the work that the voluntary sector does feeds into the data right across the piece. So we're really useful, especially in terms of youth engagement, adult engagement. So if that can come through, that would also be extremely useful. And then just in terms of equalities data, I wasn't quite sure where that sits. So could you again do your very best to demonstrate that we are an equalities focused borough, that we understand what equity is, and have that reflected in the data we're capturing in terms of who's participating and where they're from.
Yeah, I think all of that all of those contributions are extremely helpful, and I'm sure we can provide written responses to all of those in the short term and embed some of those contributions into how data is recorded. I will make a quick reference to the Tackling Racism, Inequality and Disproportionality programme, which does have some important baselining data which isn't in this report, which we could absolutely produce some current data for comparison as an appendix to this, which I think is a really good idea. Yeah.
I must apologise to the chair and the committee, but I have prior engagements, so I'm going to have to leave at this point. But I thank everybody for answering the questions I put forward as well tonight.
Good night.
Okay. Thank you. And the last person, and this is Liz.
So I want to ask you something, Chair, first, but just to say actually that prompted a thought in me, that particularly because we're looking at budgets and all sorts of things, that actually if we have a way of measuring voluntary sector sort of impact in across a lot of different space, because it's not just within the youth justice, it's also within lots of the children, young people, but also adult social care, and there's all sorts of areas that it does. Is that something that we actually can do? Is that
Happy to quickly give you a quick response on what's available. There is a contract for a voluntary sector umbrella organisation that does hold quite a lot of information about the state of the sector, the sort of the nature of change around organisations that are delivering within Newham, and some information around the services that they provide. There's also, in a wide variety of different sources, information in different directorates about different contracts and different partnership arrangements with the voluntary sector. There's actually been a piece of work to look at the effectiveness of that arrangement, which is imminently due to complete, which I think would be a useful document and piece of work to look at. And
sorry, is that the effectiveness of the arrangement with the umbrella organisation,
yes,
Compost, or is that the effectiveness of the relationship with all of the voluntary sector?
Primarily Compost, that piece of work. But again, I think it's one part of the picture. Obviously, it's a small part of the picture. I have to check the contract, but one of the elements of that contract is a regular kind of insight and impact survey of the voluntary sector itself that Compost, I think, are accountable to deliver. I'm sure there'll be some data off the top of my head. I can't give you past line hand.
National data, isn't there, about sort of like, for example, the impact of youth provision and the kind of the value for money against other ways of delivering youth provision. So that would be really useful data to have, particularly when we're looking at budgets and things like that, and what should and shouldn't be cut. I do have more, but I can see that the chief executive.
Chair, that we provide a written response around what information we can provide and data.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and
No, well, because I believe, Chair, that you wanted us to ask questions around retention of staff and things like that.
yes.
And I'm wanting us to deliver what you as the chair saw this item as.
I was coming to the chief executive because I did signal that, but I know this is one of your items that you raised in another place, and so feel free, and then I would
So I wasn't completely sure how this item was meant to go, because the stuff that we've been looking at isn't to do with this. So if you're happy for me to ask a question.
One of the things that, okay, let me put the question to the mayor. One thing that our members are concerned about, and said members, I too, is that over the years, I will come to you, the chief exec, but in the past, we've had many chief execs, whether be they interim or and so on. I'm not only chief exec, but other senior managers, and even in the mayor's office, there's been an itron of staff, etc. And we are concerned in terms of the delivering a fair renewal program with the degree of turnover, and it's how it's going to impact on our ability to deliver that consistent dependently. If you keep changing staff or staff people moving on, they take with them every time they come, and they have to reset every time, because when people come in, they take some time to get their feet under the table as it were, and then to start again. So that obviously, and to some extent, you the chief executive knew you can't, but the mayor can answer that. That is a worry for us. And the culture. One of the things that you said, Mayor, and consistently so, is that the culture at one time was a fit for purpose, and you're working on changing the organizational culture to deliver. So for us, it was putting people the art of everything we do, and now it's building a fairer NEOM. Do we have the culture in place now to build a fairer NEOM, this organizational structure? I will stop there. And for you to answer.
Is that a question, or are you setting the scene of why we're asking these questions?
Yeah, I will stop there because there's setting the scene there, and also the mayor in there is also a question.
Okay,
Can you find it? Go on.
I will try. So I'm going to start by saying this. There is no organisation in the world that is not exposed and subject to staff churn, and it's important that you embed culture and practice, and embedding the right culture and practice takes time. That regardless of that churn, because we operate in a work environment, be that in the public sector or the private sector, with the public sector increasingly constrained because people are leaving the public sector, partly because of aging workforce, the inefficacy of the local government sector to be planning effectively, and also the competitive edge that the private sector has over the public sector in terms of wages that they can offer, and consequently talent that they can attract. We operate in we're hurtling towards the quarter of this 21st century in a world where there's a huge significant battle for talent everywhere. So I think it's important to understand that context. I will answer your question because I am trying to find it, if I may. But I wanted to say this. I am confident, and the Chief Transformation Officer can attest, that the cultural change programme that we initiated back in 2019, which no doubt, as the permanent new chief executive, Abby will want to consider as part of our discussions around where next for the organisation, building on the phase one restructure that we initiated after last year's local elections in May, that things are moving in the right direction, but culture over sort of, systems re-architecture are two very different things, and both are happening at the same time. We've got, we've got thoughts, and we've been thinking about, what kind of organisation we need to be. I'm really clear that I want it to be a best first time organisation, an agile, enabling innovation and thinking and creativity so that we are optimal in our service delivery. And that's the reason why, in terms of this remaining period of the municipal year, absolute focus on some of those core issues that we know our residents are bothered about, fly tipping, or a excellent resident experience, because we know we're not great organisationally at that. And I'm sure through the chair, both James and Abby will want to make some comment, but we're happy to come back with more detail once Abby has had time to assess, do her diagnostic, and we've had a conversation, and we can come back with, the future model state, as it were.
And this.
Thank you. So the two sort of areas that I was thinking about was to do with us being able to deliver on, our corporate objectives and things like that. And so one is sort of much more generic in terms of all staff. Do we have, and I presume we do, maybe through internal audit or something like that, do we have sort of our minimum staffing levels in order to be able to deliver our statutory and our non-statutory services? We're obviously going through a budget process at the moment that's wanting to look at more trimming down. How close are we to those levels? And bearing in mind that we're having to cut some of the recruitment, but also people are leaving in quite high numbers as well. Actually, is that something that we have on our risk register that we're checking, and how close are we to that minimum level? And then the other thing is looking more at the sort of more senior and strategic roles, where we seem to have quite a high churn, because that obviously will impact our ability to deliver. And are we doing analysis around the reasons for leaving? So you gave some really good examples of some reasons, but is that because those are generic reasons that anyone might leave, or is that actually the data that's coming back to us, say through exit interviews and all that sort of stuff? When we're analysing that, are those the reasons, or are there other things that might be more new and specific that we could then work on in terms of cultural kind of how we operate and things like that?
I'm sure Abby will want to provide some thoughts, but also James, in light of the work that we've been doing since May. I'm acutely alert to the level of interims at the top, and it's something that Abby and I have spoken about from day one. In fact, even pre-day one, as part of, her coming in once her appointment was approved at full council, and needing to accelerate in terms of the permanency of corporate directors, et cetera, But I do think it's important to give Abby just a little time, but we know that we've got to get going. I know that the permanency around inclusive economy and strategic housing delivery is absolutely critical, as is the health and adult social care, as is, the ones where you've got interims in place, and that's being mobilised around. On the new and specific or these issues that local government are facing, I would veer more towards the latter than Newham specific, because actually conversely, one of the things that I pick up and I'm told, and senior officers are told, there's a real appetite on part of the officer corps within local government to come and work in Newham because of the really interesting things we're doing, notwithstanding the fact that Newham is a really challenging borough, because it is a challenging borough. It's complex. It's got, you know, borough place characteristics like no other borough in London or elsewhere. But yeah.
Okay, can we, right, so we need to move this up. What, okay, I'm going to let you come in, Chief Exec. In terms of us in town, you said it's happening in other local authorities, but have we done any analysis or any to see whether we are an outlier or whether it's in terms of our show and whether we are the same as Martin, Dagenham, Ackley and all the others?
We can certainly provide you in writing because
okay.
we will need to aggregate the data.
Okay, that's fine.
Different recruitment campaigns. We get that advice from, you know, the experts in the local government sector that can provide us actually the comparator where appropriate. I don't want to promise specifically what we can offer. We'll have to go back, but I don't know whether you or James or Abby through the chair want to comment on either of those 2 points.
I'm pleased to hear from the Chief Exec, and while you consider, given the time, I might as well put in my bit. Given everything, and welcome to your first meeting again. Now, given everything that you've heard in terms of our finances, the performance, data, culture, and the range, what approach would you take to ensure that we deliver on our big one, building a fair in Newham? So in your answer, you can include that.
So Chair, first of all, I'm going to say it's stage 4.
Pardon?
It's stage 4. And I'd be worried if I had a conclusive answer in terms of my approach, but I think I wanted to tackle the recruitment thing first, and also just my initial reflections coming into the organisation and delivering the fair. I'll do it really quickly if everyone's at the same time. So I think the first thing is my priority is absolutely stabilising the top team and ensuring that not just for you guys, but also for the stability within the organisation, workforce needed. And that will be happening quite quickly. So Mayor and I discussed it. It's a priority of mine as head of place service. I'm responsible for staffing. The other part in terms of my reflection with the team that are currently there, they're not all permanent. I think everyone knows that. But they're absolutely the work that's happening in the vision. They're a plan and they're being delivered to. So my expectation is when the permanent can become, it's a continuation, not to stop. There is no new vision, there is no new plan. We're delivering against the visions that have been set. So hopefully that should give some reassurance. And just as I'm not going to say which local authority, but there is a neighbouring local authority that actually has 4 corporate directors out right now. You're nodding, you probably know which one I'm talking about. So I would not worry too much about instability in leadership. It's not unusual at this time. And I think anyone who sees some of the kind of improvements going on, nationally, especially across London, you'll be reassured that right now it's a live issue. And it's about how we retain and mental elsewhere. And then very quickly, just in terms of my approach at the moment is my priority from that first 6 months really is around stability of my workforce, making sure that they're invested in. Providing some room in terms of real transformation to ensure that we're delivering within our financial envelope and against the corporate vision. Also just ensuring that you're quite thinking the right things to do that. So my approach will be two-pronged, but I would prefer to formulate it in something, in writing, and I will come back here. I'm mindful it's day 4, and then you'll learn from each other. I'm not somebody who says something and doesn't do it. So I'd rather commit to what I say. That makes sense.
Okay,
Chair, I'd just like to say that this clock is wrong. We actually only have 4 minutes left of the meeting.
I don't know about the other authority, but we have a big ask in terms of finance, in terms of delivering the period. So we need to deliver. And given that I'm told the clock is wrong. Okay, so thank you all for attending. There's some things that we must do this evening, and if we move on to item 7, Item 7, I know I bring it comes to the floor, because there's something that we need to do in terms of the task and finish.
Chair, one of the recommendations, our scrutiny commission was to develop a task and finish group on the local plan. So by you, Chair, can we have authorization to do that? And for you, Chair, and other chairs to sort out the membership.
Do we agree to have a task and finish on the local plan?
Yes.
That agreed. Okay, so we would then do the other work.
Is that how we usually agree?
Chair,
It was,
Chair,
yes,
Chair, just for clarification, there was an action at a meeting of the regeneration environment scrutiny because we presented on the local plan and there was a suggestion around an in-depth or series of meetings to just explain local plan versus development economics versus the strategic housing delivery plan. Can I just get some clarification? Is what has been just approved, is that the same thing or something different so that I can advise officer colleagues?
yes. It's at the meeting, which I think you attended, I attended and I left.
Yeah.
Briefly. It was proposed that the task and finish be set up to look at the plan. And that's one that we'd have to do very quickly because time is of the essence.
It's the same as what was discussed at that meeting.
It's derived from here.
Oh,
It's even brought to, but we need to.
We've got to sign off the membership, the budget scrutiny.
Yeah,
you want us to leave?
You can stay because it's not, we don't have long. And next, another agenda item is also ratifying the membership. Do we ratify, agree, membership?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And the next item on our agenda is the reconvening of the Black Boys Commission.
Agreed.
Do we-
Agreed.
Also-
And so we give delegated authority to the chairs in terms of what aspects of interest.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Also,
Thank you.
I think there's an additional member of health scrutiny who needs ratifying. Can we do that?
What's the name? Pardon?
The issue of councillor Penton and myself swapping committees.
They want to swap, Chair. Agreed.
Okay, is that agreed?
Chair, agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. And the date of the next. meeting-
Sorry, councillor Campbell, have we agreed the additional member for health scrutiny?
Name your member.
Stephanie Garfield.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Good, thank you.
Okay, and I can put in the date of the next meeting, 12th of October.
Agreed.
That noted.
Noted.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Still recording.
No, no, no.
Michael Morrison.